Hello everyone, and welcome to our first meetup of 2025. Woo. Woo. Glad to see you came in such large numbers. Any more and we would have had to find some more seats. So glad everybody's here. Hope you all had a great Christmas break. Got to recover from everything, and now we're here to, well, listen to all things we got at reInvent and maybe what we can do with it. But first, in the spirit of reconciliation, the Melbourne AWS user group acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. Our in-person meetup here is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of this land. We pay our respect to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Just as important as the acknowledgement of country, we have a code of conduct. I trust everybody here is a great person, but in case something happens, you can see here a very short version, as a longer version of a code of conduct on a webpage, and the very, very short version is be nice to each other. Shouldn't be much of a problem, but if there is a problem, reach out to one of us, one of the organizers, myself, Rob, Jason over there, or if you don't want to do it in person, reach out over Slack, or on the page there is an anonymous form. So the user group were available on the web. We have LinkedIn, Mastodon, YouTube. YouTube should be obvious if you're watching this online. But you can see all past recordings and such there as well. For tonight, I'm doing some quick introductions, then Jason will take over and quickly go through some of the announcements that happened since reInvent, because they might not come up during the panel. Then we have a roundtable, panel, whatever you want to call it, and we'll just end with a usual marketplace segment where we will ask who is hiring, instead of asking people to hold up their hands when they're looking for a job, asking people to tell that they are hiring. This is to avoid the unpleasant effect of being here with your manager and saying, hey, I'm looking for a job. That might not go over well and might guarantee that you're looking for a job. So mentioned, ask questions. I don't know how many panel questions we get a chance to ask. I prepared a whole list, but if there's anything you urgently want to know about, let us know, and we'll probably have them at the end. Of course, I always want to thank our sponsors, without whom this event would not be possible. They're the ones who provide our food, drinks, and venue. Our gold sponsor for this year is once again Mentor Group, and our silver sponsor is CIVO, and we also want to thank our venue sponsor NAB, who provide this lovely place. Now, I mentioned Slack before. If you're not in our Slack yet, you can just go here. It's easy. I should add a QR code to this. The Slack is sometimes busy, sometimes quiet, but it allows you to see all the latest news. We've got channels for that. You can talk about jobs, outages, announcements, all those things, and generally. We've got a bit over 1,000 people in there. Not everybody's talking at the same time, so don't worry. If you want to get involved, we are always looking for speakers. Best way to help a meetup is to say that you want to give a talk. I firmly believe that anybody is capable of giving a talk. We are not judging anybody on previous experience or whether or not you yourself think that talk is good. We have experienced speakers, we have speakers who give a talk for the very first time, and either of those can be incredibly useful for people in the audience. So if you have any ideas about giving a talk, reach out to one of us. We also have a form if you have a talk that you know you want to give. Otherwise, talk to one of us and we'll happily discuss the options of, okay, maybe you can do something like this or that. Sponsors, getting more money into the user group is always a good thing. So if your company or you yourself have a lot of money and want to sponsor us, please reach out as well. And if you want to help us volunteer or help us organize the meetup, we are looking at adding members to the organizing committee, just for a fresh breath of air, because we've been doing this for many years and it's always good to have some new ideas come true. If you want to be involved with it, please, again, reach out to one of us and we'll happily talk about it. Events coming up. Community Day Brisbane is being organized. Myself and I know at least one other person in the audience is involved with this. No exact date yet. The goal is August. This might change depending on how things go. I'll let you know when there's more, Closer to home, the Programming and Tools meetup has it's the next meetup on the 12th of February. This is about Bedrock stuff and step functions. It's given by Matt, also one of our organizers. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it tonight due to personal issues, but I'm sure it will be a lot of fun. Women in Cloud also has their next meetup on the 6th of February. This time it looked like it's going to be a CDK workshop, which is really cool, so definitely go along to that. And the well-architected meetup is back on the 19th of February to talk about automating all the well-architected pillars. This is actually something that AWS is very much pushing, so if you do anything with well-architected, this might be worth attending. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jason to talk about some of the new stuff.
All right, thanks, Ian. So there was a lot of stuff since reInvent and up till now, so I'm not going to go through everything, but I'll sort of go through the topics and show. We actually had a few things come up in Melbourne, so end user messaging for sender ID registration. If you do things with sending out SMSs and things, you used to have to go through support. There's now an automated self-service option for that. RDS, performance insights, extending on-demand analysis. So if you're using that, you can sort of set your own timeframes and do that on demand. That's now in Melbourne. There's a new Gravitron instance type that's come out. The R8s are in Sydney. So if you're using Gravitrons, you can upgrade to the latest version of those. Databases, a few things came out there. So support for FIPS if you need to use that. SQL Server supports some custom parameters for native backups and restores. So you've got some options around that. And if you're using Bedrock with and creating knowledge bases, you can now do a quick create for Aurora to use as your vector store there. Compute. So if you're doing stuff with Windows and Image Builder, you can now more easily convert an ISO into an AMI. So that's handy if you're utilizing or pulling in some ISOs. And if you need 6 to 8 terabytes of memory on your instances, you've now got an option for those. Hands up those that are using like 6 to 8 terabytes of memory. Yeah, I'm sure there are some use cases, but it yeah, and I'm sure they'll be very expensive. So, all right, a couple of things in data, some extra connectivity, native connectors for Glue, and data sync supporting Kerberos. All right, containers, quite a bit in there. Mostly sort of some incremental things in there. So if you're using Kubernetes, you've got some extra options there. I'm sure you probably would have seen a lot of those, but check it out if any of those headlines interest you. ECS, so you can do some fault injection experiments if you're using ECS with Fargate now, and some extra health monitoring. So those are all good things. Machine learning. Right, I am not going to go through all of that because there's a lot there. As with everything at the moment, you know, Bedrock, AI, all the things. But there's some interesting ones there, especially SOC compliance for Q Business and stuff. So some guardrails, reducing pricing is always good because you want to have those guardrails in, and if they're cheaper, more cost effective, go for it. Oh, actually, one thing I will just jump back. So SageMaker SDK. I have seen a few things around at the moment. Someone running, what's the new DeepSeek on SageMaker and getting it to run on Bedrock and stuff. So there's some fun things out there. Right, some extra stuff in networking. Support for concurrent VPN connections if you use the AWS VPN client. Interesting, the supporting bandwidth configurations for VPC and EBS on some of your instance types, and some extra SES stuff if you're using that for your email. Yep. Helps if I hit the arrow button, not the shift key. All right, serverless, there's a few things in there. Amplify supporting TypeScript. The event bridge, the direct delivery to cross-account targets is nice. It makes those easier is good. Some extra integrations for your step functions. So yeah, some interesting things in the serverless world. Security, so you can now get your Route 53 DNS resolver, any issues showing up in Security Hub. So that's good. So config supports service-linked accounts for Recorder. And yeah, some extra stuff with code build. All right, storage. So I'm sure some of these things may be mentioned, but your S3 metadata and tables now available. So yeah, larger general purpose bundles for workspaces. DevOps, there's quite a lot in there. So a couple of things. The AWS backup launching support for search and item level recovery. So that sounds interesting. However, it's only for EBS volumes. It's not actually for EC2 instances. So if you back up your instances by your EBS volumes, you can search. If you back up your instances, it's not available yet. So, but yeah, there's a few good things in there. Other stuff, support for zone groups for availability zones. 8 decimal place precision for usage pricing if you're using Marketplace. Like this one might be interesting for some consultancies because AWS are pushing that like nobody's business. The simultaneous sign-in for multiple AWS accounts is an interesting one. So Obviously, previously, if you were logged into an account and you opened a tab, you wanted to have a new account in the same browser, it would log you out of your first one. This lets you have simultaneous sign-ins, similar to like roles. If you were adding new roles, you sort of had a limit of 5 that rotated. You still got a limit of 5 accounts that sort of your 5 most recent ones. But it's definitely worth checking out. And yeah, I mean, there's some stuff for there was actually a few things for the console mobile app in some of these announcements recently. Push notifications. I don't know anyone that... Does anyone actually use the AWS console mobile app? How do you find it? I know I've used it a time or two, but yeah, I just... So for anyone watching, yeah, we had someone in the audience was just giving their experience on it, but yeah, it's sort of what I found. It's okay for some things, but you might as well just jump on the web interface, especially if you're like on a tablet. And that's it. So yeah, I mean, that was a very quick run through, but I wanted to give all the time for our speakers since we're having a panel. And thank you. If there's anything of interest, you can go look it up yourself. Thanks.
We have one for the panel.
Hang on.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Jason. And with that, I'll invite our panelists to join me here on stage. Yep. Wow.
Ooh, we can see ourselves
looks
and
very
ourselves
trippy.
and ourselves.
Okay, this works.
I am a child, after all. And this was replay.
Okay. Cool. So, thank you, all of you, for coming. Let's just quickly do a short round of introductions. I'll just start here and move on. So, Stephen.
Hi, I'm Stephen Sennett. I'm a senior consultant with Kinetic IT, so I do a lot of AWS stuff in my day job. I've been doing AWS for about 10 years now, and I'm also an AWS community hero. Jeez, you're easily amused.
Hey everyone, Boyan Djivich. I'm a principal consultant at Mantle Group. I'm an AWS community builder, AWS ambassador, and I spoke at reInvent last year.
Woo!
Hi, I'm Dave Hall. I'm an independent contractor and consultant from Canberra. I've been working with AWS, and I work with everyone from startups through to enterprise clients. And if you see me hobbling around, it's because I broke a bone in my foot. So
we're not clapping about the broken foot.
It's all about bragging, right? Yeah. Almost a hero. Hi everyone, my name is Olga. I'm a data engineer for REA Group, if you know realestate.com.au, like properties. And I'm AWS community builder, and one of those meetups next week, Women in Cloud. If you're interested, let me know. So we're organizing it next week.
Awesome. Thank you all for coming. Stephen, Boyan, you were here last year as well, so you're returning. Dave and Olga, thank you for stepping up and joining the panel. Start with some simple question. Talking about reInvent, have you had a chance to go to reInvent? And if not, would you like to go? let's start on the other end this time.
No, I didn't. Yes, I went to reInvent, so second time this year, and mine is a bit different. If you don't know, you can actually go to reInvent for free. If you're part of underrepresented groups, like Dale here as well, and if you are within your first 5 years of career, tech career, so you could do anything else before that, but if in tech you've been less than 5 years, you can actually apply and go there for free. So that's what I did. I went.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, so last year was my second reInvent. I've been the last 2 years in a row. So, yeah, it was good.
Is it better?
I think
Yeah,
it,
it was better second time around.
yeah, I learned that as well for many reasons. Second time around again for me as well. Definitely more interesting because I spoke at the event, so a ton of nerves for that. But yeah, Stephen, mate, how many times have you been to reInvent?
I have only been the once, so this year was my first time to reInvent. I've wanted to go many times before, but for many reasons haven't been able to. So yeah, first time and a very interesting experience, would highly recommend. And also echoing Olga's point about All Builders Welcome Grant, please do check that out, All Builders Welcome Grant. Applications open generally about the middle of the year. I'll plug that at any chance I get. It's an awesome program.
Yeah, it's a great program, so it's good to see that it's being used. Yeah, obviously, just for context, I did not get to go this year. I have been in the past a couple times. I wish I could have seen you there, Steven, for the first time, meet up there, but
I wish you could have seen Boyan's dance moves at replay.
I can neither confirm nor deny those dance moves.
I'm not sure if that would be something I would want to see, but cool. So all four of you actually went to reInvent. Having been to reInvent, I know that that doesn't mean you actually attend sessions. So did you attend many of the sessions or not? Let's start with you again.
Your Honor, I plead the fifth. No, so for me, I got to a couple of sessions here and there. The main thing at reInvent, though, is that one of the fantastic things about reInvent, for anyone who's not too familiar with it, is that you can watch most of the sessions online after the fact. So any of the things that we would have been able to see at the sessions, you can also see online on YouTube afterwards. So when you're at somewhere like reInvent, the main thing is spending a lot of time with the people who you see there. So Boyan and I spent a fair bit of time together. Olga and I, Dale as well. Walmsley, there you are as well. So I think one of the major things for me was spending a lot more time with the people and then being able to watch some of the sessions afterwards, which, yeah, there was a lot of really, really great sessions as well. But I spent more of the time around with the people because that's one of the rarer things I get a chance to do at reInvent.
That's a hard act to follow. Look, one of the big things with reInvent is kind of networking as well, whether that be sitting and talking to people at booths to kind of get the perspective of, whatever, this is working, right? Excellent. To get the perspectives of the technologists, the various different groups that were there, even the people we met from Atlassian, in my case, for example, their chief technical officer was there. So it wasn't just that you had the C-suite or people trying to sell you things. You could actually sit there and have the deep technical conversations. Did I go to any of the sessions? No, I was asleep for most of it. I'd wake up at like 9 o'clock. I'd skip quite a lot of the, the keynotes, except Werner Vogels. If you do go, do not miss Werner. It's a whole show. There is like violins going in the intro. I think the year before he had Matrix going as a theme for everything. So he walked out with like a million lamps on him and a giant leather, trench coat. Not the most comfortable thing, but it's always wonderful to go see. But yeah, it was fun.
I'm going to call you out on that because you did go to one session that was your own.
Well, yeah, okay. One exception.
Yeah, so I only went to one session. I had a front row seat, and that was on the end of my bed in the hotel room. I plugged my laptop into the hotel TV so I could watch Werner's keynote from the hotel room in the morning. 2013 when I went, not 2013, 2023 when I went, I found that I was traveling between venues all the time, missing sessions, getting caught in traffic, getting caught talking to people when I was trying to go to sessions. So this year, I went the complete opposite. I'm like, I'm not going to any sessions. I did actually mean to go to Boyan's, and then I saw him afterwards, and I'm like, oh no, I forgot. But the networking, I did loads of networking, got to catch up with a bunch of people. I work with clients in the US and from other places, and some of them were there, so it was a good opportunity to catch up with clients and other people I work with as well. So yeah, as Stephen said, you can actually watch most of the sessions on YouTube later. I actually was watching some 2023 sessions on the plane on the way over this year. So
Just one thing, the only ones that are not recorded are chalk talks. Those are the ones where you quite literally pull up a whiteboard with a bunch of people and you just figure stuff out.
And Boyan's talk is on the YouTube as well.
Well, thank you for the promo.
And you still didn't go. I feel like I don't belong here because I went to a lot of sessions. I was just going to sessions. So yeah, so for me it's the second time as well. And first time when I went, I booked any session I liked, and which means that some of those sessions would be recorded. I thought waste of time. But this time I was smarter. I went to chalk talks and I went to workshops. There are games. You can learn how to program, AI models that drive the car, Deep Racer. You could do many things. And as long as you focus on something that is more practical, you get a lot of value from it. Yeah. So if you're thinking to go or not to go, I think if you do go, I recommend sessions.
No, spot on.
For
And
a
the thing,
change.
it's the value side, right?
Yeah.
When you take workshops, you can take something tangible away from it
Yes,
where you've played with something. If you're just getting someone to tell you what the announcements are, just check it up on Twitter or Blue Sky for that matter, like 5 minutes later anyway.
And also there is a trick as well. So don't book all the sessions. Sometimes there are sessions that don't have any name. It's just nothing. And you book it, and then when they have announcement, that's a session on that technology that just came up. So you will be the first one to see it. But you don't know what it is.
Surprise sessions.
Yeah.
There was, when the year that Deep Racer came out, that was especially because they had blocked out so many sessions without a name. And they were all workshop type sessions. And it was literally, you just had to book them before. And they released even more of them than that. But that was,
Yeah, and the moment they announce, it's booked out, right? So you have to book in advance.
Yep. Cool. So you all four were busy networking, attending sessions. Did you have any chance to stay up to date on what was actually being announced?
Anybody? No?
I
Alright,
think
cool.
comes from me now.
Look, it's hard, but the best part is because you're usually with a bunch of people, whether it be from your company, for the community. Everybody's got different things they focus on and enjoy. So, for example, I had people coming up to me telling me all these things about data, which over my head for most of them. But then when it came to some of the serverless announcements like SnapStart for Python and other things like that, I went absolutely mad and couldn't stop talking about it. Or even Kubernetes, which most people hate, but hey, that's okay. It's fun when AWS actually manages the whole thing for you. EKS auto mode, look it up, it's awesome. It's difficult, but feel free to have conversations with people. They're more than happy to fill you in.
Yeah, and I guess to that point, one of the interesting conversations I remember having was, so we might talk a little bit more about this, D-SQL, one of the new services that came out. There was a bit of a quirk with that where it actually requires 3 regions to operate, which in Australia, my first thoughts were, well, maybe this wouldn't be suitable in Australia because 3 regions and we only have 2. Data sovereignty becomes an issue. But if you're only running a witness region, maybe that isn't an issue. So a lot of those things where you get to think a little bit more deeply about things by having those conversations with people, working through some of the ideas, and generally that's what it's best for. I mean, there are blogs. Most of the years I've done reInvent in the past have been from home. I'll look at the blogs, the RSS feeds, and that's great. It's great when you're getting to talk to people who have those insights, and you can just kind of build a bit more of a holistic picture around the things that might not be mentioned as well.
I still remember there was an announcement session about D-SQL, and then Steven published on social media, D-SQL! And that's how I know, it must be a new thing.
Yeah, I think watching social media when you're at reInvent is really valuable. That's where I kept up with most of the announcements because there's just so much going on. You can't really keep up with it all like by yourself. There's not enough hours in a day in Vegas, unfortunately.
Well, it's because in Vegas you mostly live during the night, not during the day.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's Australian time.
Yeah, I'm sure you have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm sure you woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning and went to bed like 9.
Absolutely. And best event, APJ on tour. I know a few of us were there, and it was very fun.
How about we actually look at some of the announcements now? So, if I say that most of the interesting announcements were either previews and or not available in Australia, do you agree with that? And how does that make you feel? Who wants to
I
start?
don't agree. So that's the reason why. I know, controversial. So every year they announce something and it's in preview. And it's normal, right? We expect it. But they also have announcement where something becomes generally available. And I think this year many technologies that became available have Sydney. In this sense, yes, it's expected to be preview, but whatever is not preview is available. Most of it, like not everything.
That's interesting. And I think the S3 tables announcement was actually one of those as well, where that one went straight to GA.
I think still preview.
Bedrock and Australia do not get along, and it makes me so very sad. Oh my God. So I agree on some senses, right? Stuff like regarding the typical DevOpsy stuff, serverless releases for like SnapStart, and I'll quickly describe what that is. SnapStart with Python and C# or .NET in this case allows you to actually capture your Lambda function mid-initialization, right? So at the point where it's just about to start. And for what AWS does, they take a snapshot of that. And every single time you run your Lambda function, it runs it from that initialization point. So your cold start times, and especially with something like Python, drops from 1,000 milliseconds to 200 to 300. That's on par with some of the more, should we say, compiled modern languages, right? And that's huge. And especially with Python, because it's arguably probably the second most popular language used for Lambdas. Usually it's some sort of JavaScript or TypeScript first. But we are always going to be a second-class citizen when it comes to the AI stuff because there's just not enough hardware. One of the great announcements and one of the reasons why we don't have all the Bedrock stuff, like the new models, is a lack of hardware. AWS released that they're working very closely with Anthropic, the Claude team. They're training the Claude 3.5 models on AWS's hardware called Trainium, unlucky NVIDIA. And that's just going to take a while to come to us. And with things like data sovereignty, yeah, it's going to take even longer.
Maybe we don't need it. DeepSeek R1.
Yeah, try running it on anything useful.
Like, I grew up in Melbourne. I love Melbourne, but I run all my data sovereignty stuff for Australia out of Sydney. And the reason for that is the services are more likely to be available in Sydney. Melbourne is like the DR option, or like, you know, we'll store the backups in another region option. And I would love Melbourne to have more stuff, but I also get that it's a chicken and egg thing because people like me are going, we're not going to run stuff in Melbourne, so Melbourne doesn't get the services, but we won't run it here until we get the services. So it's tricky.
Yep. Cool. What was the coolest announcement? Not necessarily useful, but just the thing that made your eyes shine.
All the databases are basically multi-region now. It is insane. So it wasn't just Aurora DSQL that allows you to have multi-region databases, right? Vector databases through Elasticache, multi-region tables available. DynamoDB, cheaper multi-region, tables available. Significantly cheaper, actually, to the point where they now know they have competition from other vendors. Aurora, obviously, through DSQL, MemoryDB, Valkey, so on and so forth. And look, for most people, it's not going to be useful. right? We're in a world right now where a single region just makes more sense. I'm in 3 AZs. Technically, they're all, you know, geographically separate to each other. Who really gives, if I can be frank, a shit? The reality is, when that time does come, for the tech to already be around for a long time, by the time we need to use it, all the bugbears are gone. So that means, what was it? DSQL had a 1 millisecond latency between what do you call copies? That's 4 times better than Google. So that's huge.
Yeah, and I guess one of the interesting things for that is that in a lot of cases, for some of the more mature technologies, MemoryDB, Dynamo, those ones probably deserve a little bit more of the airtime on it as well, because while DSQL was announced, and DSQL being a globally distributable serverless database solution, so you can have multi-region, like active databases across, you know, multiple regions, which is a really powerful and really hard to do thing from an engineering perspective. The challenge with that one is, while it's out in private preview, there's still no pricing for it. So at the moment, you can notionally get it for free, but when that pricing drops, and again, I was having a good conversation with Michael Walmsley about this earlier, one of the things for this is they're still trying to figure out what a fair price is for it. What does it cost them to run? Because this is a very complex solution. Now, when that becomes GA and those prices drop, that could be really, really amazing, and it could be just like, oh wow, they only charge us like 0.001 cent per, you know, however many kilobytes we write to the database. Lovely. Or it could be, wow, this completely rules us out of this. So that's one of the interesting things with preview services, is that there is some of the really latest and greatest stuff, but there's also some of those unique limitations as well.
Mine was actually a pre-invent announcement. So an announcement that came out before reInvent itself. And it's not as technologically amazing as DSQL or anything like that, or any of the AI stuff. Step functions got support for JSON-ARTA, which allows you to have variables that you define in your step functions. Because I love step functions, but the mental model of it was always painful, because you had data going in, you had data going out, but you had to kind of select things, and you couldn't always select it the way you wanted. I'd end up having a bunch of Lambda functions for just doing utility management of data. After reInvent, I spent a weekend rewriting most of my step functions to use JSON-ARTA. I eliminated a whole bunch of steps out of the step functions. It just makes automation and integration work with step functions so much easier and simpler and easier to follow. It's like, oh yeah, assign the variable here, use it here, I can see that, I know that it's just going to work. Not, oh, I forgot to output that variable and now it's disappeared and I'm spending half an hour trying to figure out what's gone wrong.
Not a lot left, but I agree in general that data department had a lot of upgrade. So including integrations, DynamoDB now easily integrates with Redshift, and it's like zero downtime in transfer of data. And on top of it, if you ever used in GCP, you have BigQuery, and you have Gemini on top of it. So theoretically, you can ask in human language, can you bring me 3 tables about like these employees, right? And it will bring it for you. And then AWS now has Amazon Q integrated with Redshift, where you can do the same. And it's amazing, right? You no longer need to know SQL to be able to pull some data. And you can pull it from anywhere with zero, ETL integration. Yeah. That was impressive, I think.
That was massive, because again, you can put non-technical people to get what they want, to leave the technical people to do the real job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, that's a lot of cool announcements. But we don't just care about things that are cool and shiny. Do you also have what did you think was the actual most useful announcement? Something that you can use on a day-to-day or relatively day-to-day basis?
One thing that was really interesting for me was coming across what was it called? The declarative policies. So one of the new features with declarative policies coming out is that you can be a lot more prescriptive about what you want to allow for either EC2 or VPCs. So you can actually say, we don't want to have console access. We want to block specifically console access for all of the EC2 instances within these AWS accounts across an entire organization. So these are a lot of things that seem a little bit quality of life and like you can do it in other ways. But at the same time, when you're dealing with large organizations, many AWS accounts, perhaps very, very stringent security requirements, the ability to just be able to declare, this is what I want across all of these accounts, it applies, that's all I need to think about. There is a fantastic thing about taking the mental load off that by not needing to come up with alternative solutions for that and just saying, I declare we are not using public images. I declare we must use IMDS v3 or v2. So all those types of things, very, very useful. Also available in Australia. At the moment, it is only EC2 and VPCs, and I think RDS as well. Yep. And so I am looking forward to seeing that come out for more services as well. So it's in the same vein as the service control policies, the SCPs that you apply across your organization. And I think that's going to be really, really interesting, seeing where that goes, particularly for larger organizations that have a lot of security requirements.
Yeah, look, I'm in the same boat with the RCPs, the resource control policies. I say you can't use a thing, that's it, you don't use it, especially for a lot of the compliances, and I can see people already starting to shut off because compliances and security are a pain in the ass. They're fantastic. One simple JSON policy to basically say you can't use a thing. The one that really, really excited me, funnily enough, was the UI changes they actually did for CloudWatch. It's very, very usable now. It's almost a complete observability platform as compared to what it used to be, which was a pain in the ass. It's now completely functional. It's quick to query. It's fluid. Still expensive. But if you do have to use it now, it is very, very nice, especially the updates they've done to X-ray, the RAM and synthetic side. Having recently come off a project where we've moved someone off Datadog briefly to test out how it functions, you can go 100% native now, which is great, and not suffer.
Yeah, you stole my answer. I was going to go with RCPs. I think the other one, I think it was a reInvent announcement, blocking access to the root account, which is great for organizations. So you can set up the accounts and just block the root access, which simplifies managing large fleets of accounts.
Have to be different, right? But so as somebody working for product company, I'm mostly focused on announcement related to my field, which is data. And for me, it was S3 tables. So the reason why, because sometimes we also use it already in this sense, right? If you have a CSV file or you have Parquet in your S3 bucket, you can actually query it using Athena, right? So if you want to check something quickly, you don't have to load it to your warehouse or database. But then nowadays, you can actually structure it as table, and you will have metadata, you will have partitions, you can manage it like actual data lake. And I think it's impressive, and it kind of helps you not to, you don't need to set up a lot to be able to have actual warehouse.
Yeah, it was a dead giveaway that AWS has gone all in on Iceberg. So if any data engineers here know about Iceberg, they've gone definitely down that route. So any integration that uses Iceberg can just connect into S3 tables with very little effort. So it's nice to see that I don't have to spend so much on EBS volumes.
It's a table format.
Awesome. Those definitely interesting announcements. And unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to play with all of them. Something like S3 tables sounds amazing. Just waiting for an opportunity to play with it, other than some demo data, which doesn't.
The cheapest one to try.
Well, that's always good. Better something like DSQL where we don't know the pricing, which could be, as you said, something cheap, could be Macy.
Multi-region AWS, let's just assume it's going to be a lot.
Yeah.
And thinking about one other announcement that pops up as well a lot with the useful category as well is EKS Auto Mode as well. That one being a very interesting one in terms of being able to more efficiently manage Kubernetes, because as has been mentioned, like for a lot of people, Kubernetes is sometimes a bit over-engineered for what we need, but things like auto mode do make it a lot easier. I don't pretend to be an expert on that, but to plug another community event, so up the back we have Yong Kang, who runs the Kubernetes meetup, and also we have Dale up the front, who's going to be speaking at the panel next week, talking about all things Kubernetes and AI. So I'll plug that bit and say if people are really interested in Kubernetes, check out that.
And it's feature parity as well. GKE has had it for years. Oh, thank you. GKE's had it for years. AWS finally caught up. AWS is quicker to release new Kubernetes versions, but around the feature set of EKS, they've been kind of slow. So it's really nice to see that they're putting more effort around their product, not just the Kubernetes community.
So does auto mode actually solve the issue of having to update it every 6 months?
Yeah, they'll do it for you. They'll basically just say, here's the APIs they're going to deprecate. Here's the extra money that you're spending to get to that point, because there's all things wonderful in AWS. First, they cost you a lot, then they get cheaper a lot later. And then makes that process easier to kind of filter through. If you've made an absolute snowflake out of Kubernetes, you're still going to suffer the same headaches that you have today, and don't expect it to fix all your problems. But for short-term lived things, or even if you start off using EKS auto mode, it's great.
It's that nice gap, I think, between doing things just in ECS with Fargate and saying, I don't need anything fancy. I just want my container to run and just do container things. And saying, I want to go full Kubernetes. I want to be able to control and do all the things. I think auto mode is that nice thing to say, yes, we want to do Kubernetes, but we don't want to deal with all the headaches that potentially come with it.
Yeah, spot on.
That's good. So we mentioned already a bit about, hey, things available in Australia. We are the Melbourne AWS user group. So I just want to see, was there anything useful announced that is available in Melbourne?
Coffee.
Look, S3 tables are coming to Melbourne at some point or another. But if I had to say what's available now, RCPs, the resource control policies, are there. And look, I know that's not fun, but
You
Jason
need,
Arthur's
need
there as
resources
well.
to control.
yeah, Jason, actually, no. The reality is that, like all jokes aside, that's huge. You'd be surprised how much of the world right now, having worked with a lot of tier 1 banks and startups and basically everything between, much like this wonderful gentleman here, step functions everywhere, and they're quite clunky in the legacy design that they had. The ability to basically say, hey, we can unclunkify it just by adding a couple variables in is huge. We've saved, I would say, probably 20 to 30% of some of our step functions timing in not having to add an extra step or not having to invoke SSM parameter store or anything that adds extra latency. So you can actually use it as a time-saving feature, and it's genuinely fantastic. If you are trying to actually do any orchestration with serverless or anything inside of AWS, in that sense, I suggest starting with JSON data because it just makes life a lot easier.
I love the term unclunkify.
Well, with that sad state of affairs out of the way, how about the same question for Sydney? But I assume there's a bit more over there.
Interestingly, there wasn't really that much extra in Sydney because Sydney historically, when it comes to AWS releases, Sydney has been fairly far down the totem pole. Over the last few years, Sydney has become a lot more of, I guess, that kind of one of the first-class citizens of AWS releases for each of the regions. But this year, there still wasn't quite as many as I would have expected in previous years.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I think one of the few that were kind of a dead giveaway was, we got the instances. We just got, as you saw, the latest Graviton 4 instances, the R8 Gs, and they're great if you were doing ARM workloads. Funnily enough, if you want to spend a lot of GPU compute money in AWS, they made that readily available in Sydney. So not the H200s, but the H100s. GPU instances became available in Sydney relatively early. So if you know that Bedrock's crap and you want to run things quickly and efficiently, maybe even try your luck with Spot, which will probably fail, but anyway, that was there. None of the heavily exciting stuff, only because of just the originality of it. To give you a bit of a totem pole description, as Stephen said, you've got the US, Ireland, and London usually become the first-class citizens, shortly followed by Europe, and Singapore, and then the rest of Asia, and Australia usually is included in that rest of Asia portion. Japan usually and Singapore are fighting on who gets the next slice of that pie.
So for me, coming back to first question, right, about preview or what is available. So a couple of services became generally available, and Sydney is one of the regions. So one service in particular I quite like. I did a couple of workshops called Clean Rooms. I don't know if you know about it. It was announced in 2022. Then 2023, it became preview, and then this year it became generally available. Sydney is part of it. So imagine if all of us have data sets, but we don't want to share the data, right? So maybe Steven has something in Azure. Yeah, Bohan has something in, I don't know, AWS.
With your TikTok.
Oracle Cloud.
Oracle, and Dave has a Snowflake maybe, and I have something else. And now we will be able to do analytics across our tables, but only use the information that is available. What I allow to see, they will be able to use for their analytics. And it's pretty cool. You can collaborate with different companies. Your company can do analytics with someone else. And it's multi-cloud, which means that you can use your warehouse in GCP, say, and connect it to Azure. I think it's a pretty cool feature, so I haven't used it. I'm very curious to try it, and I think there should be use case, and that's amazing.
Cool. So not as much as we'd hoped for, but at least some interesting things. Speaking of maybe not always getting what we want, was there anything you were hoping for that would come out of a reInvent that didn't happen?
Lambda, GPUs. We still haven't got it. And I hate to say this again at an AWS user group, Google had it first. They beat us to it. Google Cloud Functions have freaking GPUs attached to them. What if I want to run a PyTorch thing without using a damn, CPU? And it really frustrates me because they have the technology behind it. They've had the hypervisor Firecracker now for 2018 when they first announced it. They've had all this time to make Lambda this wonderful, wonderful thing, but they've pigeonholed it into this CPU and memory only capacity. The problem is the world is now going onto GPU side, right? Whether it be that they give you the ability to use their own, or whether they create FP GPUs that give you the ability to process things at a different rate, because a GPU in all fact at the end of the day is in its own right, its own set of cores, its own set of memory. It's like a computer attached to a computer at the end of the day, specialized in this one thing. Not having that ability to do it, we've seen third parties start to take some business away from AWS because of that. RunPod and others like it, who give you the ability to run a container for a short period of time with a GPU and just pay cents on the dollar to do whatever you need to do. Now, here's a bit of heresy for those that love ECS. Kubernetes is great for that because I can have my GPU instances spun up with Carpenter shortly, run them, shut them down, pay for a certain period of time, right? So this is why AI, which I'm sure Dale presents at that, again, the Kubernetes made up, run by the powerful Mr. Yong Kang over there, we'll go all into it. But it's a fantastic, option for it. The counter argument now is that people will always argue the point that Kubernetes is complex. 2025 Kubernetes is not 2020, well, not even 2020, 2018. It is a good thing. So yeah, that's what, grinds my gears.
I'll disagree with Boyan on two things. One, Kubernetes is not simple. And
Fight me.
outside. And number two is GPUs attached to Lambda. Yes, that would be nice. But SageMaker serverless should have GPUs in 2025. And it's not available, which
Spot on.
is frustrating.
That's the same hyperplane. It's the same mechanism. They're just choosing not to do it.
I think one of the interesting things that seems to pop up in the way that AWS views AI is that they aren't necessarily angling themselves towards some of the mid-range where people are looking to use GPUs with AI. They're looking either towards the people who are wanting to build very highly scalable models using things like Trainium and using custom hardware for that sort of thing, or people who just want to consume it. So Bedrock, REST API, give me response, ping, magic, lovely. There's that mid-tier of things that are using GPUs that just doesn't seem to exist there. And I wonder if that's, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily decision on their part, but it feels like there is a very particular gap there for that mid-ground where they say, well, if you want to train with, large models, use Trainium.
Yeah, look, you're spot on. And the part that really frustrates me is that I think it's a choice to use a service as an API instead of using common sense. Even Martin Fowler has now said that microservices are just monoliths that are being coupled, so tightly coupled monoliths are everywhere, even though he was advocating it for so long now. in-memory calls are going to be always quicker. If I have a GPU instance, I have much quicker ability to actually invoke what I need to invoke. And it's not just for those AI workloads, because hell, if I have a Lambda function, I doubt I'm going to have 48 gigabytes of VRAM to run my LLM in. It's more for the PyTorch, for the ML stuff that's outside of that Gen AI sort of space that it's really lacking. 100% right, SageMaker should have it. I would love to see it. But if Lambda had it, that could be even better. And why not have it as a training offering instead?
So one thing, interestingly, on that Gen AI space as well, and again, this is a bit of a broader commentary on the thing of Gen AI versus traditional, quote-unquote, AI. I'm sorry to Dale because she had to listen to me rant about this at reInvent. One of the things they had installed at reInvent was using Amazon Q, or no, it was Bedrock, it was Amazon Bedrock, to play chess. And it would basically feed all the state of the board into, you know, this text prompt and say, here's how we're going to play chess with AI. And it's like, this is a solved problem. Why would you do this with Gen AI? This is literally reinforcement learning 101. So again, when everything looks like a nail, we're going to apply the Gen AI hammer. And I feel like that is something that AWS are doing quite a lot at the moment, is if there is a nail, then we will apply the Gen AI hammer to it. And applying something like Amazon Q to something like chess, again, that's a bit of a nice little thing at a, you know, conference. But even talking to AWS SAs, you know, the answer is almost always to some extent Gen AI.
Yeah.
But that allows their sales team to say, look, Amazon Q can do what Watson was doing over a decade ago at IBM.
Welcome to the anti-Gen AI talk. This is what happens when you give us microphones.
I know.
I'm
But
not
I know that
anti-
especially
I'm not
by-
anti-Gen AI, I'm just anti-poor application of it.
Yeah,
Yes.
same. I'm just pro solution and problem, not solution looking for a problem.
Yes.
Well, speaking of Gen AI, also just a general thing. I only have 2 more questions here. So take this time to think about what you want to ask. Otherwise, I will come up with other things. I will ask
You'll ask
ChatGPT.
Q for questions.
So we were talking about Gen AI, and AWS obviously has terrific naming with the Gen AI products. They call it Q and Q and Q and Q.
And Bedrock.
And
that-
Nova.
So what announcement had the best name and which one had the worst name?
I'm going to go with Aurora D-SQL because of the fact that A, it's called Aurora for some reason. The other part of it is that nobody, even within AWS, seems to agree on whether it's D-SQL, DSQL, or the way I'm going to pronounce it, D-Squeal. So if they don't give us proper naming things, then I'm just going to call it D-Squeal.
Surprisingly, this year, they weren't that bad. We didn't have another form of EBS. Like, we've got Elastic Beanstalk and Elastic Block Storage, right? EKS Auto Mode is, guess what? EKS running in auto mode, which is great. S3 tables were tables that you could run effectively from S3. They actually used quite a lot of common sense. I think they probably looked at some of their fellow cloud partners and thought, maybe we don't want to confuse some of the SAs and engineers and make the exams even more painful than they already are. Probably the worst named one. Geez. I don't get the approach they have with their models, with LLMs. So they had Titan, now they've got Nova. Where that's kind of coming from, a supernova maybe, planetary body. Titan is a moon on, I think it was either Jupiter or one of the other planets. It's just a bit funny. There's no real marketing spiel to it. Because at least with DeepSeek, it's R1, DeepSeek something. I don't know. AWS needs to rethink that.
You're complaining about AWS marketing? Like,
Always.
This is a perennial problem.
We're community builders. We always do.
Yeah. So my naming fail from this year is SageMaker has now gone down the road of Glue, and some of the other services where it is like service and we just tack something on the end. So now there is SageMaker AI and 2 other products have been spun out as separate things. So now SageMaker's just become a catch-all for a bunch of sub-products. So, yeah.
Wasn't SageMaker already?
It was
always-
already like that, but it was all under one umbrella. Now you've got to figure out which of the 3 umbrellas the product lives under.
SageMaker Studio, SageMaker X Studio, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's just...
Heavy light media for models. I guess everything is said already, so they definitely can't go worse than lumberyard.
Yeah, what was that actually?
That
That's
was a game
That was a game server.
Yeah. It died a couple years ago.
yeah, not surprised.
Stop. So check it out. That was the best name, I guess, of all times.
I mean, and to the point of SageMaker, I mean, it sounds like a bit of a nitpick, but one of the challenges with things like SageMaker is if people want to start doing machine learning on AWS, it's like, okay, go learn SageMaker. It's like, okay, I'll open up SageMaker, and then, oh my God, what is all this stuff? It makes it very difficult and complex to get started. So it is a very real problem that when we have something like SageMaker, and the tools within it are incredibly powerful. It is incredibly cool what you can do, especially with things like Jumpstart. SageMaker Studio even is quite useful with a lot of things as well, and a lot of things like Feature Store as well. But the challenge is that they've made it so hard for people to even know what's what, unless you're almost an expert in AWS SageMaker and its whole family of services. It's very tricky for people to get started as well.
And also very expensive.
Yes.
So, and if you don't know how to delete it, you will never delete it. So it's very
Oh,
hard.
yes.
And speaking of deletion, most of it can't be managed with infrastructure as code. You have to use the SageMaker SDK for managing the lifecycle of resources, or ClickOps.
Moral of the story, kids, get a Lambda function, chuck on AWS Nuke, and run it every night.
Especially in your production accounts.
No, that's when you resign. You do that just before you resign.
We're doing chaos engineering.
Before I move on to the next one, I'll just see if anybody in the audience has a question they want to ask our panelists. I'm sure if it's anything Gen AI related, they'd love to answer.
Or Kubernetes related. We love that. Are you
Bring it
okay?
on. Or even if it was just how was reInvent, what things to consider? Because I'll answer a question that has been asked. What are my 3 tips to reInvent? Bring lip balm, hydrate, and really comfortable shoes. Because you're in the middle of a desert, you're going to struggle to hydrate, and my God, were your feet going to hurt. Because Senna and I had a competition of who can do more steps. I think you beat me. You had one of the days you had 30,000 steps. I had 27,000.
I made the mistake of thinking that hotels were closer than they really are. I can see a few heads shaking from people who might have been to Las Vegas before. For context, up at the north end of the strip is where most AWS reInvent things were. I stayed at the southern end of the strip because I booked fairly late. Walking to the rest of reInvent took about 40 minutes or so, I think. So 40 minutes each day, and it's like, hey, I just want to pop back to my hotel room. I do not pop back to my hotel room.
Yeah, each hotel is like a suburb. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Then you have to go to parties as well.
Question
And
at the back.
He also went to reInvent. I remember him.
So-
Catch up, like the source. They're playing catch up.
Yeah.
So and just
Well,
to
one more, just to repeat the question.
Yeah, just to repeat the question. So for AWS, are they leading in AI or are they playing catch up now? Where are AWS at with the rest of the providers?
Absolutely catching up still. This is going to sound a little bit of insider baseball, but hear me out. There was a talk from Werner Vogels before Gen AI really kicked off that he had at Sydney in 2021. I was lucky enough to actually go to that. We had a bit of a tech forum. In 2021, AWS was a bit bullish on the concept of Gen AI. Like, we still haven't found much of a use case. We haven't invested as much into it. And then towards the end of the year, you started hearing murmurs of, oh crap, we need to get Bedrock out as soon as possible. So it was initially a bit of a rushed approach. However, where they are today and how quickly they're catching up, because they've got all the world's money, It's only a matter of time before they come up to that same sort of level. The thing is, we're uniquely positioned in our part of the world that we just get things slower. It's not just AWS who are kind of slow to the field. Azure sucks with AI right now in Australia. GCP, Gemini, may as well just throw that in the bin. You're kind of better off running your own. So better question you should really think about is, can I have enough compute to run my own AI to facilitate my AI needs in Australia? Yep.
Okay, before we were talking about the GPUs, right? But AWS has the GPUs for teaching, repairs, and
Yep.
but and then you're talking about you run your models, right? But I think AWS gives you the ability to run your model, let's say Delta, right? And then you run on your ECS or EKS. Do you see any value in that, or do you think it's better off another different use case?
Of course. So let me ask you a better question. Can you definitively tell me that OpenAI, Amazon Q, Bedrock, every single one of them, every managed service can comfortably tell you detail by detail where your data is, what they're doing with it, how they're filtering with it, how they're playing with it, and where is it going? No. You see a little tech box saying it's going to Australia, but are they learning off it? That's why a lot of organizations now, they're putting in compliance that if we are going to use our data, our documents, our whatever, right? And from a consulting org's perspective, we do not use Gen AI to make statements of work or responding to like a request for quote, because there's someone else that's going to learn our data or even our customers' information, right? When you run your own, you have the ability to choose to run what you want, how you want, stay up to date with the open source community as quick as you want, and to shut it off when you're not using it. So the argument of, subscription is cheaper. Well, why are you running it 24/7?
What
Yeah,
about
and
optimization? Let's say you have the NVIDIA name running on ECS.
Yeah.
Or EKS.
Yeah.
How do you think the optimization?
This is the beautiful part of Kubernetes. Kube, I can say, hey, I have a pod I want to spin up using Carpenter, for example, and it requires this node pool, and it's got GPU. You can scale to 0. I use it. I pay spot if I can get away from. By the way, in Australia, there's a company called Nearmap. They do geospatial compute. Anybody heard of them? Getting a few nods, getting a few no's. They use 90% of Australia's GPU compute at all times, to the point where they jump to other regions to do their compute. A famous talk they had at KubeCon in Sydney, right? You are going to be very competitive on the cheap end, but it can absolutely be done to be cost efficient.
Just back to if Amazon is playing catch up, I agree, and I'm a bit less convinced of their strategy. And so back at reInvent 2023, I started to think maybe Amazon's doing a bit of an Apple when it comes to Gen AI. Not being the first, but kind of taking time, thinking about it, kind of doing it properly, offering Bedrock with Anthropic's models and third parties models and stuff. And I was thinking maybe they're actually going to get this. And then Apple went and released Apple Intelligence. And I was kind of like, okay, being the Apple when it comes to Gen AI, maybe it's not such a good thing. And just the science, like the branding around Nova being the new model, like I don't think they clearly communicated, the why Nova, why you should move from Titan or whatever. And it just feels like they're dropping the ball more than they should be.
Can I steal your spot for 1 second? Who actually has heard of AWS's Nova LLM before? What about DeepSeek? Literally every one of you, come on. Yeah, it's crashed the market. That's my point exactly.
I mean, to this point, sorry. No, go ahead, please. I was going to say, to that point of where AWS...
Moments.
There we go. Okay. In terms of where AWS is at in the market, I think the challenge is everyone's compared to OpenAI. And the thing is, no companies are near OpenAI. OpenAI have taken the lead, aside from maybe Anthropic and one other maybe. It's very hard to say that you top those. Even for Microsoft, who basically have a huge stake in OpenAI, even Microsoft aren't doing much better than Amazon. So I would still say Amazon is up in the leading field. The challenge for Amazon is that they don't seem to really have a coherent strategy on what they want to do other than be a leader in the Gen AI space. And it's like, yes, but how? What does that look like to be a leader?
I just want to point out, these are the early days. We are in the very first days of what cloud used to be. That's where AI is right now. Here's another question. Do we have a agreed upon format that we have for all AI models that we're communicating across? Not really. Most people are building proxies for OpenAI calls that are then querying out to the native models. Why? Because most people are going to build on top of OpenAI because that's the one thing that they know. So if I build a proxy, I can use whatever I want on top of it. So that's part of the issue that we have today. You can imagine in the bad old days, and I'm talking about the XML days, way back when it was all, a little bit simpler than it is today. SOAP was the default standard. It's crap today, but it was the default, and you still see some SOAP calls. REST has become the standard now. People know what gRPC is. We're getting these standards that are well-defined in an industry that's been around for long enough. AI is not quite there yet. We're at the initial part of it. The scale at which it grows, functionally, is massive. Usability-wise, we're not quite there yet. There has to be a breakthrough in the interactivity model for us to really utilize it to its utmost. It's not just about how performant it's up. I'll give you an example. If I drove a Ferrari into a wall, I'm still driving a Ferrari into a wall, no matter how fast I'm doing it. If I can't swerve out of the way, there's no point.
I mean, go ahead, please.
Finish the point.
The only point I was going to make there is we can't even generally agree on what the concept of artificial general intelligence is. Like, ChatGPT-4 is out, it's AGI. Oh, Claude whatever is out, it's AGI. DeepSeek R1, it's practically AGI. O1, it's AGI, blah, 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 blah. Guess what? None of that is artificial general intelligence, but people can't even agree on that definition. So, hence, a good sign of where we're at on that maturity curve.
Yeah, a lot has been said about AI. I'm not going to talk about it, but there is another concept, right? For people who are not familiar with AI, who don't know how to host it, who don't know how to use it, but they need to do one function. Maybe to read document, to extract it from an image, or maybe to recognize sentiment in an email. And AWS has microservices, serverless, which you can use and have a little bit AI in your application without the need to pay for expensive model. And I think they did well.
Oh yeah, Tesseract is awesome. It does the exact job. Recognition is great too. I think that's the split between the traditional model of AI and what marketing companies have done to all of us over the last 3 years.
But those hosted services, Comprehend has PII, or personal information, personally identifiable information detection. When you go to sign up for Bedrock, you have to justify why you want access to the model. They actually have a warning saying, do not mention Claude because it will trigger the PII detection and your request will be rejected. So kind of shows when the services don't line up within AWS.
And I think there was a conversation that Boyan and I had earlier tonight, and I think, Olga, you and I had a conversation about this back at reInvent, the whole thing of AI being a part of the solution, not being the solution itself. So we're not trying to say AI will be the thing that solves it, but AI becomes a part of the greater solution.
Except Copilot and Amazon Q. That stuff's awesome. Go use it. And most of it's free now. It's made my life so much easier.
Other questions from the audience? Then I'll just throw in my last one. And you don't have to limit this to one service, but talk about a service that we haven't discussed yet that you want to talk about.
ECS. There's a reason why I'm saying ECS. ECS now has the ability to be, wrong choice of words, my third language. ECS now can better move its workloads between availability zones when you have to scale. Previously what happened was it was a little bit slow, a little bit lethargic. The spin-up process was a little bit clunky. It was waiting to interact with the service. They have the ability now with ECS through a new feature release that wasn't named, thankfully. It was just, here's this cool thing with ECS to have, that it can reliably do workload migrations between availability zones for you. You just need to enable the state. And when you actually look at the state in which your task is in your service, it'll actually say transitioning at this point, which is fantastic because if in the worst case scenario, you don't have, for whatever reason, enough compute in an AZ, not so much an AZ going down, You've got to remember resource contention is a thing, especially with regions like Melbourne and Auckland coming out at some point. You can just say, okay, great, I know the workload's going to exist here. I'm going to reliably and much quicker spin up a container in another AZ.
Something that was very interesting to me and might be interesting to people in this room. So for all the things that Q Developer does, and it does do a lot of things very well, one thing that was announced was also .NET modernization. So I know for a lot of organizations out there that have a lot of old .NET code, and I'm currently staring at something that's running .NET 4, and oh boy is that fun. There's now some capabilities with Q Developer to be able to uplift older things from, I think, .NET 3.5 all the way from that's what, 12, 13 years ago now, all the way up to .NET version 8, which realistically, for being able to bring up an older application stack to something a bit more modern, is quite cool. And it's something that AWS use themselves quite a bit internally, because AWS runs on a lot of Java. They love their Java. God help them. And one of the big things for Q Developer last year was their ability to uplift their older Java versions to their newer stack. And then being able to actually take advantage of the newer runtimes, removing old security challenges, without having to say, okay, here's a whole bunch of Java stuff, just here's a whole team of developers, go work on this for a couple of years. God, does that sound like anyone's idea of a good career? Certainly doesn't to me. So for anyone who's looking at a lot of .NET code and they have a lot of legacy .NET stuff that they want to maybe modernize, I would take a look at that. There's some mainframe stuff in there too, which is interesting. I don't know how efficient these things are, but I know legacy code is a pain point for everyone. So the Q Developer modernization stuff, take a look at it.
All right. I think this was a pre-invent announcement, so it still counts. And it's a separate namespace, so it's not Aurora. It's the RDS Data API is available for Aurora Serverless version 2. And the really cool thing about this is often you need to run your database in a VPC, and you need to be able to have a Lambda function to connect to it and stuff. Now you can use the Data API to make connections, so you can have Lambda functions that don't need a VPC, or even step functions can connect directly to your database and run queries against the database. So you can actually have a relational database that is serverless without reliance on VPCs or even Lambdas.
You've just reminded me this was a pre-invent announcement. Aurora Serverless v2 is officially properly serverless. You can scale to 0. So we've had Aurora Serverless v2 for the longest time. It couldn't scale to 0. Pre-reinvent, it can finally properly scale to 0, and you can do proper transactional SQL stuff serverlessly, dubbed serverlessly, using Aurora. It's great.
And it is really interesting how that Aurora Serverless v2 scale to 0 works as well, because one of the things that I was kind of expecting for that is that they would have some kind of cost per transaction, but instead what it kind of does is it just pauses it, and so there is a bit of a startup time. I think it was up to 10 seconds, and I think it was if there's no writes within 24 hours, you can have a cold start time of up to about 30 seconds or so. But at the same time, if I've got something that just does service-to-service communications very infrequently with other companies, and it's not waiting on human interaction, does 10 seconds matter for a response? Not really. Like if I'm just doing service-to-service, that is a really, really good use case, and suddenly opens up a lot of possibilities there.
Yeah, it's great for automation stuff with uneven traffic.
Awesome. I think with that, we've close to scheduled time anyway. So I think I want to thank all of you lovely panelists. Olga, thank you. Dave, Bojan, both of you flew down from Adelaide and Sydney respectively, so thank you for coming.
Canberra, not Adelaide.
Oh.
Don't tell me that much.
What's the difference?
I meant Canberra.
The longest commute.
I'm disappointed you don't come over every month, but you know.
You need to make the meetup worthwhile, and maybe I will.
Okay, well, we'll get some better quality speakers.
Stephen also, of course, thank you as always for coming. That's mostly the end. I did mention the marketplace segment. Is anybody hiring at the moment? Otherwise, I would say...
I will call out one final thing. One of the great things about reInvent is the swag. You can end up with some awesome socks, like Ian's AWS socks.
These were from the summit, I think, but yeah.
And
So
if
check out Summit.
if you really want to see all the actual swag they have, there's an AWS hero from Wollongong called Nick Trentafolo. He's got a blog he releases every year from reInvent that he actually gets, I kid you not, he brought back 35 kilos worth of swag with him, including things like keyboards that he won. Mind you, it was just a challenge from Launch Darkly of whoever can launch an application with this config first wins a freaking Keychron keyboard. Hoodies, obviously socks, pins, you name it. There's a ton of cool stuff.
Plenty of stuff to fill the stockings at Christmas.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yep. In that case, we've got a couple minutes before we should all head out, and I, for one, need to head out because I've got buses replacing trains from 8:40, so I need to be home before then. But yeah, walk around, talk to each other for a little bit. I'm sure the panelists have more to say that they didn't get a chance to. I know that Bojan is especially shy, but you know, sometimes he can.
I have no opinions on it.
Oh, no. I'll keep myself very close. I'm a man of few words.
Yeah. So, yeah. Of course, as Rob properly pointed out, thank you again to our sponsors, Mentor Group, CVO, and NAB. And we'll see you all hopefully next month, the 26th of February, here again.
And make sure to take any of the food and drink up the back with you. We've still got some stuff left, and it keeps Ian from having to carry it home on the bus.
Thanks, everyone.
No bus, please. So, and yeah, clean up the rubbish as you go home. So, thank you all. Goodbye.